think it's fair to say that as West Ham fans, our optimism with regards to how the club operates, especially around transfers, was starting to shift. And by that, I mean, when Tim Steidten was appointed, we then had this committee at the club that involved Steidten, Mark Noble, David Moyes, and it just felt like David Sullivan was taking the back seat from the negotiation side of things and identifying players. And basically, West Ham was starting to run properly as a football club. You know, we were starting to actually behave in a way that showed a club that was going in the right direction. Now, to be honest with you, I'd recorded a video a few days ago regarding this after Calvin Phillips had signed, and my optimism was very high, I've got to admit, because I just felt like there was a real plan in place. We knew what we wanted to do. And it just feels like the old West Ham has now creeped back in right at the 11th hour of this transfer window, and the sort of shambles is, well, back into play, isn't it, really, of how we are being run? Because let's be honest, the fact that we now don't know our targets on the 30th, as I recall this is now the 30th of January in the evening, we haven't identified our winger targets yet. Because, and by that, I mean, the two that we had identified, we're now discovering problems with. Now, for me, right, if you're a part of that committee, surely to God, you would be identifying targets during the season. You'd be talking to the agents, you'd be talking to the clubs, you'd be gearing up the bids for January. Why is it with West Ham do we always seem to be coming to the party at the 11th hour, always discovering things at the 11th hour that we should have found out months ago? I just don't understand it. So basically, Ibrahim Osman, let's start with him. I mean, the player that we were all expecting to get over the line, it was looking pretty much a done deal. The player wants to join. He's even on social media, sort of putting cryptic messages up that he's unhappy or the move was coming and all this sort of stuff. It was looking on the cards. And then we discover that actually he's got a couple of agents, and the guy we've been dealing with isn't actually his agent. And actually it turns out there's a few parties involved. It's all getting a bit complicated, and they want this certain amount of money. And I mean, I just don't understand, though, why this wasn't discovered earlier on. Now, what is interesting about this, and this has come from ex-WHU employee, is that this has now become too complicated for West Ham, too much money and too much risk. Look, I don't know enough about the player, so I'm not an expert, and I can't sit there and go, no, he's a surefire thing. It's definitely going to be brilliant for us. I don't know that, so I'm not going to pretend to be an expert. But what's interesting is Brighton Hove Albion are now going back in for the player because they were interested before. Arsenal have been interested previously. But Brighton are now going to go make a move. I believe Tottenham are also showing a keen interest. And they're going to start making a move for the player this January. Now, it'd be really interesting to see if they find it overly complicated, because I think it's quite embarrassing for a football club to identify a player as your number one target and at the 11th hour find it a bit too complicated to get over the line. Look, I understand sometimes the goalpost can move, though. So, look, let's maybe just accept the fact that maybe let's just take for that one, as West Ham are correct, it is a little bit too much money. It is too much of a gamble and too much complication in terms of third parties and all that sort of stuff. But then you go on to then our sort of second choice, which was Jota in Saudi Arabia, of course, El Etihad. And the former Celtic player. And to be honest with you, this is the player I want. This is the player that if I had the choice of the two, this is the one I want. And the reason being because I think he would come straight into the side. And to be honest with you, what I've seen of him, I've been really impressed with. But yet again, another one where we're now discovering that his wages are too high, that there's a tax issue in regards to him now going from playing in Saudi and coming now back to play in England. It's a bit of an issue. But again, why are we discovering this now? What have they been doing then for the last few months leading up to this transfer window and going, he's the player for us? Surely you would have been found this out. And I just find it remarkable that 2 days before the transfer window shuts, ahead of a second half of the season, where West Ham realistically, I know people will slam me for saying this, but let's be honest, Champions League is not out of the realms of possibility this season. It isn't. We're a few points off of it, and we've only got 17 games to go. And Calvin Phillips is a great signing. If we could get a couple more over the line just to get this squad just right, just enough of a push to the end of the season, we could be in that competition next season. You never know. And yet we're dilly-dallying, we're dicking around. And while other clubs are getting their business done, we're scratching our heads going, oh, it turns out we can't afford this player now. Honestly, I find it really frustrating. And, it's quite deflating, I thought that these days were passing us. Now, it's not to say these deals are off, because X has come back and said that West Ham are still in talks for both players. But let's be honest, considering the fact one of them's in bloody Saudi Arabia, I believe at the moment, and one of them's in Denmark, and it's got to be done by the 1st of February, all of these deals, and they've got to have their medicals yet. It's looking bloody tight. And further to add to that, we're now sanctioning the sales of Saïd Benrahma and Pablo Fornals. They're literally out the door, although I believe they were training today, but they are on their way. And I think we need to do the deals. I mean, Saïd Benrahma especially. I mean, 15 million quid from Leon. I mean, I'd bloody drive them myself, and I don't even drive. I mean, my word. I mean, I don't know what scouts were watching Benrahma. I reckon they'd sent them out and went, yeah, did you go to London, by the way? I watched West Ham play. Well, yeah, we went. And it was a bit of that, a bit of a jolly boys, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, because I don't know how they come up with the 15 million. But look, I think I would accept that. And Fornals, I believe it's around the £10 million mark for Real Betis, of course, with Manuel Pellegrini looking to sign him as he did for West Ham. You know, I've talked about in a previous video. I do love Pablo Fornals, but it's concerning now. Do you know what I mean? We're actually putting ourselves in a position where we're getting rid of players. Fornals and Benrahma are not players that have not played all season, that sit on the bench and do absolutely nothing, don't even get into the squad. These players are being used by David Moyes. So what's the plan then here? So we sell these two players and we don't get anyone over the line? Because let's be honest, it's leaning that way at the moment. It's looking quite desperate. And the noises aren't good. I mean, the confidence levels are really starting to wane in terms of players who are going to get over the line. Now, look, I appreciate things can change quickly, and I really hope they do. I spoke to X earlier, and he's going to be giving updates on Patreon today. And of course, things can change. It literally can just be an email, something can be agreed, and all of a sudden, I think the mood can shift. But let's be honest. The fact as well we're playing as well on the day that the window closes doesn't leave West Ham much time, does it? And I feel like, you know, in such an important season, when I really thought that this committee would be so organised, knowing exactly who we want, it just appears, unfortunately, West Ham are very much back to the bad old ways.